My picture of Vic is a picture of him as I knew him when I was working with him for most of my life. A much younger Vic than you have seen the eminence from Tony and from Ferryden. This is a photo taken at the International Conference on Teaching Statistics in 1982, when Vic would be 44 or something, that sort of age anyhow. And I was similar age. I didn't realise until I got to know Vic when I came to Sheffield, I didn't know that I had actually overlapped with him much earlier on in my life. He and I went to the same university. I was a year ahead of him. I don't think I ever met him there, but we did actually go to the same university. So when I heard about Vic and when I got to know him, that sort of thing started coming up, and I was aware that there were things in his background that were similar to things in my background. But he was a very interesting guy. You've heard some of the breadth of the things that he got involved with, and those were his main interests. But he got involved with teaching statistics at schools. He never taught in a school. He got involved with teachers, and he got involved with projects at school level because he thought it was important that people should know about statistics from a very early age, and that they should become good citizens, good statistically aware citizens. Now, it's very interesting to see how Vic came to that, and I'll give you a summary of what I'm going to. I'm going to start about in the beginning, which is the 1950s and 60s, then some early work at Sheffield, then look at some of his international contributions, and then look at his work on the Centre for Statistical Education. Finally, I'll give you some idea of his general approach and philosophy to the teaching of statistics, particularly at the school level. And he had a lot to say on that. When I'm quoting him, some of it will be from personal interviews and talking to him. Some will be from the report of his plenary session at the First International Conference on Teaching Statistics. Vic was someone who saw something that needed doing and did it. I was interested, Tony, you talked about can-do. Nothing to do with that, but that was my version of who Vic was. Vic was the sort of person who saw a problem as something to be dealt with, and you dealt with it now. Ferryden mentioned some of that as well. You'd go to bed thinking you're going to have a nice sleep, you'd wake up and Vic had solved the problem. He was that sort of person. He went about doing things, and if a problem needed solving, he set about solving it, whether that was technical or whether it was at the school level. And he had a very incisive way of getting into the root core of where things were needed. He was pragmatic rather than a theoretician, especially in his teaching of statistics. If it worked, he would use it. If it wouldn't work, he didn't. And did it work was a very fundamental question to him. Is it going to work? If I try this in teaching, is it going to work? Are people going to learn? Are people going to be better educated because I try this? If not, forget it. Let's do something that works. He was full of energy, full of drive. He made me feel like a slow sort of tortoise to his hare. But unlike the tortoise and the hare thing, he actually got there first as well. I felt I was following him quite a lot. Well, in the beginning, it's quite a tribute to Vic that he ever did statistics at all. His experience at the University of Manchester from 1956, when he went as an undergraduate, to the early 1960s, when he came out with his PhD. Actually, I said that. I'm not sure he did do his PhD. Did he do his PhD at Manchester? Yes. He did. Thank you. How he became a statistician, and he records this in his plenary session at the first ICOTS. He said, I was discouraged from doing statistics. I was discouraged by the head of mathematics at Manchester University, where I was a student. He was very much of a pure mathematician, so I know who he was, but I'm not letting him down. He repeatedly, says Vic in his in this quote from him, he repeatedly asserted that statistics was an inferior subject, not worthy of the attention of anyone with claims to mathematical ability. And then Vic goes on, it was this attitude which was paramount in my decision to become a statistician. Whether that's bloody-mindedness or commitment, I'm not sure, but it was a feature of Vic's life. So that was his first experience, and he decided he would become a statistician, and he did his PhD. Then, at that time, the Joint Matriculation Board, which was the examining board for the A-levels and O-levels in the north of England here, set up a new A-level mathematics with statistics syllabus. And Vic got himself involved with that. As far as I can tell, he was an examiner for it, but I never met him as an examiner, although I was teaching at the course in a school at the same time. But because he was involved with it, and because it was a new syllabus in statistics, and because he was seen as somebody with authority, the teachers went to him and said, haven't a clue what all this is about, how do you teach it? And Vic's first interest, therefore, in teaching statistics in schools came from the fact that teachers came to him and said, we can't do it, how can we do it? What's it all about? And Vic, on his own initiative, set up a set of in-service courses for teachers in the Birmingham area. The Birmingham teachers came to him and he said, OK, let's have a course, and we'll do it. And so that was his first introduction to teaching statistics at schools at the request of the teachers coming to him for it. He saw a need and he did something about it. So, having seen that, it then occurred to him that there was a problem. There's a problem in teaching statistics in schools. There's a problem that teachers haven't a clue what it's about. There's a problem that there isn't much in the syllabus, and when we impose a syllabus from outside, the teachers haven't a clue what it's all about. But why should we start at A-level? Why should you just think it starts there? And so, in the late 60s and early 1970s, Vic got together a group of people with the blessing of the RSS, but it wasn't an official RSS committee, and called it the Committee on Statistical Education. Grand title, and it included some grand people. There was Dennis Lindley, Arthur Owen, who was an HMI, Alan Stevenson, who was the General Secretary of the London Examination Board, Frank Downton, and Toby Lewis. And this epitomises to me one of the ways that Vic worked. He liked to get together a group of people who were committed, knowledgeable, influential, and get something done. He got this group of people together and they decided that they would try to get some money. You need to get money to develop material to work in schools. And so together they lobbied the Schools Council. The Schools Council, history for those of you who don't know about it, was a quasi-national government organisation, Quango, which had one of its remits was to fund curriculum development in all sorts of subjects. And there were a lot of curriculum development projects being done at the time. There were 2 or 3 in maths, there was, in many subjects, there were 2 or 3 or 4, 5, 6 going on. It was a time when there was a lot of flux in the education system and a lot of teachers were trying new ideas. It was the rise of the school mathematics project, it was the rise of a whole lot of individual maths in education industry was coming through at the same time. There was a lot of interest in schools and by teachers to develop the mathematics and make it more relevant, more realistic. And part of that was including some statistics. SMP included some. There was a primary school initiative, which was basically funded by Nuffield rather than the Schools Council, which introduced a lot of data stuff into the primary schools. So Vic and his committee decided they would go to the Schools Council and say, look, we want one specifically in statistics. We would like to cover the age range from 5 through to 18. We would like to develop the whole of the statistics curriculum with practical statistical material to teach within the school context for pupils aged 5 up to 18. And the Schools Council said, that's a bit ambitious. Don't you think you ought to start somewhere first rather than take on the whole lot? So the committee decided that they would take on a bit of it to start with, on the understanding that they could go back and try again later. So they came up with this proposal that you should have a project which would work with mainstream secondary pupils. And it was called the Project on Statistical Education. And that brings us to the Sheffield bit, because the early work at Sheffield, as Vic arrived at Sheffield in 1975, he brought with him the money and the team that became the Project on Statistical Education, the Schools Council Project on Statistical Education. We were known as POSI after COSI. POSI was the project on and COSI was the committee on. So we had this project. Where was Vic in it? He wasn't chair of the managing committee, but he was on the managing committee. He didn't do the work, but he made sure it was done. He didn't officially have much role in it, but unofficially he was extremely influential, because he talked to the project director, me, and he talked to the team members, and we got his feel for what statistics was. We had our own views as well, but it was Vic that was the liaison between the university and the Schools Council, and it was Vic who made sure that things kept moving, kept going. I got an earful every so often. I remember talking to Audrey about this one time. He said he's a devil to work for, isn't he? But I thought he was a lot harder. I find him a lot easier to work with than I think Audrey did when she was doing some work for him. So this project lasted through until 1980, and it reflected a lot of what Vic's ideas were on what you should teach and how you should teach it at school level. The focus was on the practical nature of statistics and the need for statistical awareness by everyone. It wasn't aimed at making statistical specialists. It was meant to be aimed at how you become statistically aware, how you think when you're thinking statistically. And it was very much based on practical things. There were things like smoking and health. There were things like, cracky, I can't remember now. How long cars last. All sorts of things which were basically practical things, and you geared your teaching around these practical things. There was on the retail price index and stuff like that. It came from Vic's idea of what statistics is. And I remember talking to him quite a lot about what statistics is, and I'll come back to his formal definition later. But in fact, what we tended to agree on was that statistics is what statisticians do, which meant an awful lot. And it was far, far wider than what was currently in most people's minds. Statistics is a bit of mathematics, was in most people's minds at the school level then. And statistics as being what statisticians do meant we did have something on the retail price index and government statistics, which wasn't in the framework of the mathematics curriculum and the mathematical thought, for example. Stuff on experimental design, that wasn't really in the school thinking at the time, except in some aspects of science, but it wasn't in the mathematics. And insofar as the statistics was in schools was concerned, it had to be within the mathematics department, because that was the only department that would take responsibility for it. I'll come back to some of the problems with that, as Vic said later. So this idea of having something practical there was very important to Vic, and it reflected the ethos that was on the university at the time, and I gather still is, but the ethos there was very much you taught practically, and you had real data, and you had real problems to solve. And so, and if you're doing an MSc dissertation, when Vic was here, you tended to want to have real data in it. You tended to be solving real problems in your in your MSc or whatever your dissertation was. It's an approach that is more associated with Clive Anderson and Bob Loynes because they wrote the book on it. But Vic was very much part of it as well. So, where's the problem? Another problem. Vic got back to looking at his A-level. Why is the A-level pure maths with statistics so mathematically oriented? Why is there so much that is mathematics in it and not statistics? So he went to the JMB and said, why don't we put on an A-level which is just statistics? I can't make it too different from what it currently is, but he came up with a more practically based A-level statistics course. The syllabus was similar to the existing one, but the big revolution in this particular A-level was that every candidate had to do a project, a practical project. And the question that the board was asking at the time was, how on earth do you assess a practical project? Or how on earth do you assess practical projects when everybody is doing something different? Because the background to the way Vic thought and the way he was persuading the JMB to think was that everybody had to do something that they were interested in. And if they're interested in it, they'll do a better job. So let them choose whatever practical they want to do and let them do the statistics in it. That was revolutionary. There had been various ways of trying to include A-level practical work in A-level statistics, pure maths with stats before, but not very much. And certainly not as revolutionary as Vic was trying to do it. So, there's a problem. How do you assess it? Within 3 days, Vic had drafted out a marking scheme. How do you mark a project which you don't know the subtopic? What are you looking for? How do you assess it so that any 2, 3, 4, 5 examiners will give basically the same mark? And how do you do it so that you're not going to distort what your candidates are going to do? Well, Vic did it. And I have to say, as I was the examiner who had to examine it, it worked very well. The A-level ran for about 5, 6, 7 years and then petered out. It never had large numbers of people taking it. It was in the hundreds rather than the thousands. But I have to say that as one of the examiners, working with other examiners, we tended to remark all the projects. They were marked in the school to start with. That was one of Vic's ideas. They were first assessed by the teachers using the criteria we gave them. We then remarked. We were going to mark a sample if we needed to, but in fact we remarked them all. I can remember only one project which didn't fit Vic's marking scheme. And this was a very bright candidate who had done an excellent theoretical project on Markov chains, which wasn't in the syllabus, and she had done a brilliant job on theoretical Markov chains. But using Vic's criteria, she got very low marks, hardly any, because there were no data in it. It was a brilliant project, but it wasn't of the sort that we were trying to encourage to do practical work. Now, when that happens as an examiner, you make a note of that, and you say, what am I going to do about this person? This person is so brilliant that I don't want to mark her down. So what do? You keep an eye on what the rest of it is. She came out with an A, which was the highest you could get then. That was the highest grade on the rest of her work. It came up with an A, whatever mark we gave her on a practical, so we left it. But if she hadn't, I'd have gone back and I'd have remarked it. Anyhow, Vic was instrumental in that. Let's look at his international contributions. In 1977, the ISI decided to revigorate its education section. And it was under Joe Garney as the chairman. And they set up 4 task forces, 2 of which Vic got very involved in. The first one was the task force on teaching statistics at the school level. When Vic came to this, we didn't really know what was happening in statistics in schools throughout the world. And Vic was tasked with getting this done. So he adopted the same method. He got a number of people together, friends from around the world who were knowledgeable, who knew what was happening in their schools, in their countries, and got them to write about their individual countries. Vic wrote up England, Wales and Northern Ireland. He got David Silvey to write the one for Scotland. And he summarised Malaysia and Japan from the official documents they sent him. Very interestingly, he is careful not to compare what is in the different subjects, and he doesn't make any comment at all. But I know from the fact that he wasn't happy with what was going on in a lot of the countries, because it didn't match with what he thought was statistics. There was a lot of probability, a lot of high-powered probability, but not very much on the practical side of statistics. Anyhow, it was a strictly objective report, and the idea was that it should be followed up, but it wasn't particularly followed by the ISI. I think they decided to back down a bit on that. But the second task force that Vic got involved with was initially chaired by Leonard Roeder. Leonard Roeder chaired a task force which was to set up international conferences on the teaching of statistics. And because of Vic's work at Sheffield and the work that was being done in Sheffield here, that committee asked Sheffield to host the first ICOTS. And because Vic was here, he was asked to be the local chairman. He wasn't the programme chairman, that was done by Leonard Roeder's committee, but Vic chaired the local committee, and who's one of the plenary speakers. And as I say, it was because of his being here that it was here in the first place. And it's here that you'll find the best summary of his ideas about teaching statistics. How else can I help teachers, was his attitude. How else can I help them? Let's set up a journal. What do we need for a journal? We need money to set it going. How much money do we need? £4,000. How can we get £4,000? Well, we can go to Joe Garney, he'll give us £1,000. We can go to the RSS, they might either lend or give us £1,000. We can go to the Institute of Statisticians, and they'll either give us or loan us £1,000. And who else can we go to? ISI, let's go to the ISI, they might give us £1,000 or so. So that's what he did. Went to the four people and said, will you either give us or loan us £1,000 to set up a journal? Two decided to loan, two decided to give. And the journal was set up. That's just a cover from as it became after about 10 years. It set off on a shoestring, and it was very much a home industry sort of thing. But it was there to help teachers teach statistics. It was a journal not for theoretical stuff. It was a journal for how can I best teach statistics in schools? How can I best do it with teachers who don't know much statistics? How can I help the statistics teachers? And the next thing that came on was the Centre for Statistical Education. Got about 2 minutes, right? Right. The Schools Council project had finished. What do we do now? Vic wanted to extend what was done for 11 to 16 to make it go to 16 to 18. How do you do that? You get some more money. You get somebody to fund it. How do you get a Centre for Statistical Education? You need funding. You need people to work in it. How do you get funding when the one university isn't prepared to do it? You get two. So you first of all get Sheffield University up the hill, Sheffield Hallam University downhill to talk to each other. Now at the time the two principals were at loggerheads. The Vice-Chancellor and the principal were not talking, largely because the principal of what became Sheffield Hallam wanted to call it Sheffield Hallam, and the Vice-Chancellor at the Road was saying, no way can you use the words Sheffield and University in your title. So they weren't talking. But Vic and Warren Gilchrist, who was head of stats at what was then Sheffield Polytechnic, becoming Sheffield Hallam University, said, OK, we'll do it anyhow. Warren said, I've got a Centre for Maths Education which has some rooms. Vic says, well, I've got some money which can pay a director and a secretary. Let's put them together. And they did, and that's how it worked. That was okay until the money started running out a bit, and the University of Sheffield was trying to retrench, and Vic said, well, how can we keep the work going? Well, let's get the RSS involved. So the RSS Centre was set up, and he set it up because of three things. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop, aren't I? But it was set up basically to continue the work and to do it with on three strands. The funding was from the RSS, from the university that sponsored it, and from some other organisation. Minitabs, SPSS, Office of National Statistics have all been involved in doing it. The thing was, if you set it up with three, then each one can say, we've got a gain. And that was a problem, solved again. And I'm sorry, I haven't had time to talk about Vic's I'll approach the statistics, have I? It was good, though. Thank you.
I think the closing remark of he was good is probably all, in some senses, that you need to say in that respect. So, I guess we've come to the end of our programme. I think Vic would have been very happy with the contributions that we've had from his colleagues and friends. Just to let people know, last year, at part of the meeting that we had with Vic in Bakewell, it was agreed that the Spruce charity would in fact effectively sponsor an annual award in his name, and we asked the Royal Statistical Society if they would actually administer it. So the Royal Statistical Society agreed to administer it, and the first Barnett Award will be made next year. The process will be advertised very shortly, and that will be again an annual event which will recognise all of Vic's contributions. So, as I said, thank you all very much for coming along. Oh, Tony?
Could I just make one very short statement?
Of course.
It's something I wasn't aware of, so I will just be very quick. In 1964, I was a student at school. I was doing A-level double maths, and I needed to pick up another O-level. The school wanted me to do this. One of our teachers said, there's just been created this syllabus in statistics. There's a pure maths and statistics A-level, and there's actually a statistics O-level. And he proceeded to teach this course so that a group of us, could do this statistics O-level. He said, don't do the A-level. You're all perfectly capable of flying through this pure maths paper, and the statistics paper is just not respectable. The A-level statistics paper is just the O-level one, except you have to do a regression, but you only have to do that by eye. So he said that you won't do that. I won't have you do that. You will do the O-level. And we went on and we did it. And another famous outcome of that is Doug Altman, who was also at the same time doing that course. We were one of the first people, I think, doing this course. Certainly at our school, it was the first time it was ever done. And I didn't realise before, Vic was responsible for me starting as a statistician. Thanks, Vic.